got an election here on May 6th, and so the question you've got to ask yourself is, who is it that I want to lead this party? Who is it that we want to move this country in a different direction? Because one of the things I said at the beginning of this campaign was, this election is extraordinary. This election is different. This election offers an opportunity for this generation to make its mark in a way that it has not. At a time when we are at a critical junction. And so the standard textbook campaigns just won't do. You know, poll testing every position to try to figure out whether it's going to be politically popular, that just won't do. Our party has always been at our best when we led not with polls, but with principles. Not with calculation, but with conviction. When we summoned the entire nation around a common purpose, a higher purpose. When we asked ourselves not just how we were going to win, but why we should win. What values we stood for. That's the kind of election that's required right now. And so, as you're making your decision going into this week, what I want you to focus on is who can actually deliver on change. Because I believe that change will not happen unless we change how politics is done in Washington. Think about it. We've been talking about health care reform for decades, since Harry Truman. Every 4 years, presidents come before you and say, we're going to solve the health care crisis. And yet, it does not change. Why is that? Well, part of it is because you've got drug companies and insurance companies spent $1 billion over the last 10 years lobbying, providing campaign contributions, PR. So is it any wonder that those laws are very good for drug and insurance companies and HMOs, but they're not so good for you? The same is true when it comes to energy. We've been talking about the energy crisis since the 70s. Yep. Since I was in high school. I wasn't in 3rd grade, but I was pretty young. And yet, year after year, the only thing that's changed, we actually increase our imports of foreign oil. We're spending $1 billion a day, every single day, sending them to foreign nations. We have seen ExxonMobil make $11 billion in profits last quarter. You are paying $3.60, $3.70 at the pump for gas. $3.75, and we're melting the polar ice caps in the bargain. Why is that? Well, it turns out Bush put Cheney in charge of energy policy. He met with the environmental groups once, he met with the renewable energy groups once, he met with the oil and gas companies 40 times. So is it any wonder then that the policies emerging from Washington have been very good for ExxonMobil, but not so good for you? Now, unless we change that pattern, we are not going to change policies for the better. And so, when I hear my opponents argue that, look, we need somebody in Washington who knows how to play the game better, I try to explain, we don't need somebody who plays the game better, we need somebody who puts an end to the game playing. That's our job in this election, to put an end to the game playing. And that starts with pushing aside the special interests and the lobbyists. And that's why, and this is an argument that I've had with Senator Clinton. She says they represent real Americans. And so she's taking more money from Democrats than any other Democrat or Republican. I think they are a real problem. And that's why at the beginning of our campaign I said, we won't take money from PACs, we won't take money from federal registered lobbyists. And everybody said, well, he won't be able to raise the money. They didn't understand. You would provide the money. $25 checks, $50 checks, $75 over the internet. Which means I'm accountable to you. So we can go and tell those lobbyists their days of setting the agenda in Washington are over. They have not funded my campaign. They will not drown out. They will not run our White House. They will not drown out the voice of the American people when I'm President of the United States of America. Woo! Now, there's a second component, though, to bringing about change. Yes, we've got to reduce special interests and lobbyist influence. But you know what we also have to do is we have to have leaders who aren't afraid to speak the truth. And you know, let me give you an example right now of the need for some truth telling. We just mentioned gas prices. Everybody is affected by it, although some are affected worse than others. I mean, we've got folks who are making the minimum wage and have to drive 10 miles to a job. They can't afford the increases of gas to get to their work. I met a guy who couldn't even go on a job search. He had just been laid off. He couldn't go search for a new job because he couldn't fill up the gas tank. There are families who are making decisions about buying food or buying gas. So this is a critical problem that requires a serious response.
Food into gas.
So what does John McCain do? He suggests that we suspend the federal gas tax for 3 months.
That was bullshit.
Now, I want you all to understand what this would do for you. You would save 30 cents a day for 3 months for a grand total savings of $28.
Woo!
$28.
It's not even taking
Right
gas.
now, you can't even buy a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven for 30 cents a day. That's John McCain's plan, and he's got no way to pay for it. Hillary Clinton, she maybe was reading the poll, she said, yeah, me too. So now it's the Clinton-McCain proposal to suspend the gas tax for 3 months. Here's the problem. Is not only is it worth 30 cents a day to you, but it takes money out of the federal highway fund that goes to rebuilding roads and bridges. And without that money, you could have thousands of fewer jobs here in Indiana, and our roads and bridges won't be safe. But here's the most offensive thing about it is it's a gimmick. It's the kind of thing that's done before every election.
Yep.
When gas prices go up, so the politicians in Washington can pretend they're doing something instead of actually taking seriously the need for an energy policy in this country. And that's why I am opposed to it. We are not going to do that. We don't need more gimmicks. We need a serious energy policy. So now people do need immediate relief. So I want to provide a middle-class tax cut, closing tax breaks for the wealthy, giving tax breaks to people who need them,
Eat the rich.
lowering people's tax bill by $1,000 a year, senior citizens who are earning $50,000 a year or less not having to pay taxes on their Social Security so they can accommodate these rising costs. So That's what I want to do immediately, but long term, in terms of energy policy, I want to develop alternative sources of energy. I want to increase fuel efficiency standards on cars. I want to invest in solar and wind and biodiesel and create millions of jobs all across America.
Are you crushing his head with your thumb? No.
That's the truth.